Hail and well met, fellow Amnestre. Welcome to this second episode of True North, where Northiriel and Northurion weigh in on topics of extreme importance.
Hello.
Today we're going to talk about the best and worst zones in the World of Warcraft, and I think we may have to split this into two because there's a lot of ground to cover, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Especially before you can use a ground mount. That's a lot of ground to cover.
Okay, so let's do the worst zones first. And how about if you go first, and then I'll go, and then when we switch to the best zones, I can go first, and then you go, so you have the last word.
Ooh. Okay. Okay.
So, Northiriel, what is your number 5 worst zone?
Mount Hyjal.
Mount Hyjal. Okay.
I actually really like that zone, as in it's a zone to farm in and stuff. And there's a great raid there to farm. However, questing there, when we first started going there, it was really hard because there were several different grinds. So you have to do quests to unlock multiple flight paths, which means if you don't have the flight pass, then you're running everywhere. And so even if you're on your third character, your fourth character, you would still have to open them up. And that part is just kind of annoying, as in it's not like one or two quests to open it up. It's multiple. And then I cannot remember what the grind was. But there was a grind where we had to do the same thing day in and day out for a very long time. And it was repetitive and horrible. However, I mean, it was fun like every third time. But there is one shining part on that, in that whole zone.
What is that?
But you're smiling. What is
Oh,
the
no,
grind?
I know what your shiny part
What
is.
what is the grind that I couldn't remember that we had to do?
I don't know. We may talk about it in a little bit.
Oh, okay. All right. So, I did really like getting the baby bear cubs off the trees and throwing them down onto the trampolines. That was kind of fun, but you can only toss bears on trampolines so many times before you realize that you have to do that daily quest again in order to get whatever it was we were getting. And I don't know if it was flights. I don't recall what it was.
Yeah, I guess I don't have a real negative feeling about Mount Hyjal in general. In fact, do you remember in vanilla, before they opened that zone, it existed. There was like a gateway to it, or a path to it from Winterspring, and we always wondered what's behind that. And so it's kind of cool to open that up. And the world tree ideas.
Yeah, and it's pretty. I mean, there's some areas that were really nice, but all the tree stuff on fire, they didn't
Yeah.
need to burn it for me.
The butt end of that zone is kind of annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I don't have as negative a view of it as you do. Shall we move on?
Sure, what's yours?
My number 5 is Silithus, and this is pre-Kata Silithus. I mean, it's not incredibly better now. Back in the day, it was just one of those underdeveloped high-level zones with very few quests. I mean, you're thinking, how am I ever going to get to 60? You know, because you've completed the quest before you hit 60, and you're just grinding mobs. I think I hit 60, not in Silithus, but just grinding furbolgs in Winterspring. And there's just bugs everywhere. It's very brown. And do you remember this? The only cool thing about Silithus was when patch 1.9 dropped. That was I looked it up, it was in January 2006. The Gates of Ahn'Qiraj.
Right. Is that when we started doing the farming for like garments and stuff?
Yeah, there was
to do the raids.
Yeah, there was a very cool server-wide event where you'd collect mats and submit them, and basically a war effort to open up the assault on Ahn'Qiraj. And then on the day of the drop, remember, the whole guild was there in Silithus waiting for the Gates of Ahn'Qiraj to open, and like until the server went down. So that was about the only interesting thing about Silithus.
Well, I did actually enjoy going there. I thought we went from the Ngoro crater. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
because the Ngoro crater, while it's cool, it's just so nice and green and all of that. And so it's a big switch then to go back to a deserty sort of all brown place.
Mm-hmm.
So visually it was a little bit different.
Okay, what was your number 4 worst zone?
Vashir.
How did
Predictable.
I know that was coming?
So it's my personal number 4. I don't expect it to be other people's because there's a lot of cool things in there. You open it up, you get breathing, you get a mount, etc. My problem is the spatial perception. It was such an area where I could not see because you're either below, above, or to any side, and I couldn't always see if I was close enough or not. So trying to attack someone, you might be further than you thought. So it was really just a place of finding a good place to die so you could res easily. So for a long time. I don't know that I've gotten any better in that zone, so I think it's just me for the spatial stuff. And this was the first time I think that finding stuff was really hard.
Mm-hmm. Just
You
because
know,
of that extra axis.
right. And not puzzle hard, just
Yeah.
really hard.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment much on this because it may show up somewhere else on one of my lists. But you're not alone in disliking this. It's not a generally popular zone, which is why in BFA, Nazjatar, I
Hmm.
think was originally slated to be, an underwater zone, like
Oh.
Vashtir, but I could be wrong about that. But they decided to make it a ground zone.
No, that makes sense. Well, one of the other things with Vashtir, so having trouble trying to get to figure out if I was close enough to attack or close enough to pickpocket if I was on my rogue. The other part is certain areas, a lot of the enemies were semi-translucent, which also made it hard,
Mm.
even one more level of difficulty. Which is great. It's just visually it was hard for me to do it. It was only the gameplay, not the zone.
I wish I could say I could see that, but it's translucent, so it's hard to see.
What's your number 4?
My number 4, getting to your previous point, is the Molten Front. I think that's the zone you were talking about in Mount Hyjal.
Oh,
So this came out in Cataclysm patch 4.2. It required max level at that point, which was 85. It was the same patch that I think introduced the Firelands raid, and it was kind of the build up to that. Oh man, it was a minimum 29-day grind for these things called Marks of the World Tree. I can't even remember what I was grinding for. I looked it up.
yeah. I don't either. I couldn't find it.
The only thing I can think of is that I did get a nice Flame Ward Hippogriff at the end of the grind, so there was a mount.
Ooh,
Um,
I sure hope I got that.
there was also a toy. There is also the possibility of getting a little Scorchling pet that I never got, and I do recall there were some cool hunter pets that could be tamed in that zone. But other than that, it was just a not very fun grind.
No, and I think I only did that grind on my hunter and just gave up for everybody else, figuring they didn't need it.
So what's your number 3 worst zone?
Drustvar.
Drusvar, interesting.
I did not like the storyline. It was annoying. It's linear. You can't just skip around and
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't pick what you wanted. And in the words of someone I love dearly, I do what I want. As in, I'd rather play, I'd like to move to a different location or go from a different spot. The mobs in some of those areas were so dense that going through on my rogue was sometimes okay and still really
Hmm.
painful. So I don't like being ganked by whole big mobs, and it was hard until you were at a good enough level because it was very easy to be surrounded with the flying things. In Drustvar, there's a lot of overhead items that are coming down. but also the other items, they did a good job of getting them camouflaged within the area, so that part's cool. On the other hand, it's also just annoying. I mean, it's just one level too many people in
Hmm.
tightly packed zones.
Interesting. Couple interesting things to pick up on there. So I didn't mind it that much. Yeah, I think you're right that it was one of the weaker BFA zones. So it's interesting. You say it was very linear, and that prompted me to think that's kind of been the trend in WoW, over the course of many expansions, is that there are more and more zones where you're on a linear path and you're sent to this hub, and then you do the quest in that hub, and then you're sent to the next hub, and you can't. All of those hubs are not open from the very beginning. So I think that is a trend in WoW, which I can see the frustration with that. The other thing is, I do think in general, another trend that has occurred is that over time, mobs have become much less densely packed. So it's surprising that in BFA you felt that there was a lot of densely packed mobs.
Only only in
Yeah.
Drustvar. Nowhere else. Drustvar felt very claustrophobic to me.
Uh
The
huh.
whole zone. Whereas like not Stormheim, Storm Song.
Stormsong Valley.
Yeah, it's further north. That's pretty open. Proudmoore, you can run. It's open air. It's easier to move, that sort of thing. But you could get caught in bushes. There's caves. Getting in and out of a cave in Drustvar.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just got to fight your way in, and by the time you're done inside, you got to fight your way back out. And it just felt the areas where there were bad guys felt too dense.
Do you agree that that's a trend that, like in Classic, it was more a frequent occurrence that even if you followed the road, you could get attacked by mobs? And I think that has lessened over time. I don't.
Well, I think of the wetlands, the path back and forth trying to get there from,
Oh, that may come up in the future.
yeah, but I'm just saying, it used to be, you couldn't even stealth as a rogue with all those things red. They could see through you, and that was a challenge and kind of fun. But this lost the fun. This wasn't,
Mm.
because if you're just in a zone and you're at level and you're on a character that doesn't have much AoE and you now have 3 or 4 things, you can't kite the characters either because you're going to add more bad guys if you kite. So what's your number 3?
My number 3, again, I hope I'm not obsessing too much on this. Another pre-Kata zone, and that is Fellwood. And this has a lot to do with just the leveling experience in vanilla WoW. It's like a level 40-ish zone, where you're starting to feel close to 60, but it just takes so damn long to level, and you wonder if you're ever going to get there. I believe that was another place where I ran out of quests before I was high enough to level to the next zone. The place is just dingy, green, full of demons and blighted bears. And another thing about it is it's kind of long and thin. So there's a lot of backtracking as you go out to quest and then go back to the hub. It's different from zones which are more well-rounded, or like hubs and spokes. And the worst thing, I don't know if you remember this, but that tunnel between Fellwood and Winter
Yes,
Spring.
I actually know that tunnel quite well. That may come up later too.
Okay. Well, just a couple things to say there. There's a tunnel between Fellwood and Winter Spring, and at this point in the game, there is no flight. You have to walk everywhere or ground mount. And you had to get friendly with these furbolgs for them to let you go through their little tunnel. And you started out at hated or something like that. It was so this just this interminable rep grind just to go through the tunnel. And oh man, it felt so good to get to the other side of that tunnel into the bleak winter world of Winter Spring. And I think also you had to do that to get to Moonglade if you're not a druid, right?
Right. Right. So I actually stealthed through on the rogue through that tunnel, which was actually pretty cool because I
Well
wanted to see
done.
what it was and I wanted to see if it was worth it. Um, but it wasn't too bad on the grind because usually there was someone else doing it, and since everybody knew everybody was doing the same thing, you could group it up, and it was a small area you were farming, so the grind could go really fast if there was other people there. But I agree that that was a thing.
Shall we move on to number two?
Number two, my number two is the maw. I, I think so. I think with the maw, there's that concept where later on you could skip it. I think no, you couldn't. You always had to run through the maw. But there's things that are worthy of doing in the maw, except there's very small spots where you can get out of combat if you couldn't kill everything that was there. So once again, I don't like underground areas. I realize it's all a game, so it's just the imagery. But I don't like the underground areas as much. They feel more claustrophobic, and the fact that you have a heart, you run out of one thing into another thing. So unless you can heal yourself on the fly, eventually it's just finding a good place to die. But the main part also with the mall was I couldn't see. They made that one path area so that visually on my computer I could not actually see. Some parts were so dark that it didn't matter what character you were on or how you could do it. The fact that the visuals were very difficult, and I understand they're trying to get, the ambiance and everything for in there, but it really messed with me as far as further. I always had a hard time knowing where I was. There weren't enough landmarks for me to figure it out, aside from you'd get stuck in that tunnel or in that trough or whatever it was. And every time I was stuck in it, it was just a matter of trying to stay by the edge or get out as soon as possible, and always opening my map to try and figure out where I was. So the fact that I couldn't get around very easily, couldn't see what I was doing, but there was a lot of things that I wanted to farm down there, and I just didn't like it. It was too dark, too gray, too. Yeah.
I have no comment. Do you have anything else you want to say about them all?
No, what's your number two, dear?
My number two is Hellfire Peninsula, which was the opening zone for the Burning Crusade.
I
The
considered that.
the first WoW expansion that dropped in January 2007. I mean, opening the gate to Outland was cool, and it was cool to see the whole server congregated there in the Blasted Lands waiting for the Dark Portal to open. Oh, but boy, that zone. It's big, and it's red,
Yep.
and it's interminable.
Right. Just when you finally started to go east, thinking, oh, a new zone, you realize there's a whole nother third of Hellfire that you had not yet done.
And the worst thing is, for the first time in WoW history, you could fall off the world. I don't know whoever designed that thing, thinking, this will get people excited about the new expansion. I hope that person was fired, or sent to Hellfire Peninsula. But I truly do think though that they learned their lesson, because if you think about it, the next expansion, Wrath of the Lich King, you had two options. You could either start in Howling Fjord or Borean Tundra, and both of those were, perfectly fine zones. Sorry, did you want to say something about Hellfire Peninsula?
No, I agree with you. I thought about that. It just gets interminable each time you thought you were close to the end. There was a whole new set of quests in another part of Hellfire that opened up.
I just noticed something about my list. It's all within the first three expansions so far.
Mm.
So before we go on to number one first zones, let's do some honorable mentions. What are your honorable mentions?
And my honorable mention is Twilight Highlands.
Huh.
And so this is a little bit good or bad, or some of both. It has a great opening sequence. You land there, you got to battle
Mhm.
everything, you got to battle to get on land.
Mhm.
That part, that's pretty cool. I liked that. That was good. However, what I really didn't like was there were multiple flight spots that you had to unlock by a series of quests that were
Mm,
too similar. So there's like 3 or 4 spots, and it's kind of like rinse and repeat in each one,
mm,
and you couldn't have the flight path if you didn't do a whole series of quests,
mm,
and they weren't all that varied. I don't even know that I have a single character to this day that has all of them opened. I mean, I wouldn't mind going back and
mm,
doing it, but that was kind of annoying. And then the other part that was annoying was in the northwest area, up where the dragons are and stuff. I never found really much quests to do
mm,
up there. So it's a really cool area, different looking than the rest. Not quests there, but all focused around the flight paths that you know. So that was kind of annoying. And then obviously they had some. I had patterns that used mats, so I did a lot of farming there, and I didn't mind the farming, but I just didn't like the gating to that many. You can do it to 1 or 2, but that was just too many, especially if you try and do it to on more than one character.
Yeah, interesting. So I see you don't like being forced along a specific path. You like to do what you want, as
I
you
want
say.
the sandbox.
Yeah.
I want to do what
And
I want to do.
so keep going. Do you want me to do?
Yeah, you go with your honorable mentions because that was pretty much the only one that I truly wrote down.
Huh.
Um,
I had a
because
bunch.
yeah, go ahead and throw yours down.
Yeah. So honorable mention again. Another Burning Crusade. One Blade's Edge. It's ugly.
Flying in and out from Zangermarsh to Blade's Edge. Ugh.
The I found often I got lost with the questing because there's not good breadcrumbs for the questing. Remember that was pre-flight. Well, at least pre-flight in Burning Crusade. It was not easy to get between. There's 2 levels. There's like the plateau, and then there's a valley, and it's hard to get between them. There's only a couple places where you can get up and down. My next one is
Yeah, I did have a lot of pathing issues there with Blade's Edge as well.
my spelling. Okay, so this is the first like contemporary WoW zone that I put in here.
Mm.
I mean, it's not terrible. I just didn't enjoy the atmosphere or the lore, and especially when you stack it up against Bastion, Ardenweald, and Revendreth. All of them are better zones with better lore. I just didn't enjoy Maldraxxus.
See, I could have put Maldraxxus as an honorable mention, but because I really hated it at the beginning. Then I took my rogue and tiptoed around the entire
Hmm.
zone. That helped. So I could see the zone. I could see a little bit more, get a little bit more, figure it out. And then once flight came, so it wasn't so bad. So I came to appreciate
Hmm.
Maldraxxus more. I didn't like it as a starting place. I didn't want to start there. My character still hasn't gone through the storyline, which I would like to do. I just haven't had enough incentive to do it yet.
I don't hate it as much as other places, but I don't like it. Here's the next one. Argus. So this was a Legion patch. Demons for breakfast, demons for lunch, demons for dinner. After getting flight in Legion, all of a sudden you're in a zone that you cannot fly in. And then another honorable mention is this. I really, I mean, it's okay, but it's quite small. It was just a sort of rep grind. And as I was thinking about
Wait, you
this,
didn't say
yeah, go ahead.
the name of it yet. You didn't say the name of that the last one that you put up.
Mechagon.
Okay.
Okay, for the record,
Yeah, Mechagon.
for the recording. I was thinking about this. There is an issue, it seems, with the patch zones, right? The zones that come out with patches. Like, I mean, you could rattle off the list. Nazjatar, a lot of people don't like. Argus, Molten Front was on my list. Zareth Mortis. I guess that brings us to what's your number 1 worst zone?
Orthia.
Korthia. Wow.
Yes,
Worse
it's
than the
in
Maw?
WoW. Yes.
Okay.
So Korthia is a zone that I believe was created for the upper tier of players, which I am not. Um, it is not a zone that is very easy to solo. The bosses are pretty much made to do in groupings, but by now people pretty much don't do groupings. So as long as you tap the boss, everybody gets the loot. So it's not like you're trying to form a group, so to speak. You just have to know when things are up. It there was a lot of things that you needed to have higher than gear in order to do, and so that's why I'm saying I
Mm-hmm.
think it was good for the raider who didn't have something else to do, and this was the patch zone to let them get in. But the architect was the thing that drove me nuts. You couldn't open it up for your accounts; you had to do it per character.
Yeah.
You got, so this could be a pro or a con. You got these relics that you have to turn into the architect before you've even unlocked the architect, which is great on if they were account bound and you could give it to the character that you're trying to get the architect open up. But if you choose to never open it up on a character, you have to then choose to make that decision whether or not to throw away all of those, as in just delete them, or save it for when you're doing later, which is a big plus. And I just, again, it's another spot. Find a good place where you can res if you get overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really just do this, let us keep you occupied for a few more months until we pull something else out. I do feel that Zereth Mortis was a better
Mm.
addition than Korthia was, even though there's some similarities where it helps to have multiple people to kill a boss. I felt that there was a few more like puzzle type things,
Mm-hmm.
how do you get to these places without flight, or how, getting around. That was a little more interesting. There was in Zereth Mortis than Korthia.
And
So
the,
yeah, that's my number one. What's yours?
and the whole system where you could craft pets and that kind of thing. I mean, there.
Oh, well, that's a pro and a con because getting those mats is so annoying, and the one mat that you truly have to have is the only one not account bound. It's soul bound.
But I think what you said about Korthia underscores the point that I started to make about these patch zones. You put your finger on it. It's because they're designed with people who've already maxed out their gear. The mob difficulty has to scale to like the most geared players, which makes it very difficult for people that haven't caught up, and so those people tend to hate those zones because it's just hard to kill anything. Plus the factor of, this is filler until the next raid comes out, basically. So, yeah, I totally see that.
So what is your worst? Absolute worst. The worst of the worst.
The worst of the worst, you will find this no surprise, the Maw.
Ah. So does your ma include Korthia? Because you could argue it's kind of the
Right.
similar zone,
I
or you
I
don't have to.
I didn't mind Korthia as much, because one thing you didn't mention is so the issue of alts having to do everything over. There is a catch up mechanism in Korthia where you can buy better gear for alts and send them to the alts, but the Maw. Whoever thought that a zone that is literally hell would be fun? I I just it's mind-boggling to me. I mean, not only can you not fly like Argus and the Timeless Isle, you can't even freaking mount. I mean,
Right, you couldn't for so long, and you have to find your exact body or you lose stuff. That's irritating too.
I have nothing else to say about that. Do you have anything else to add?
No, the only, Korthia is the same as the Ma. It just has a few green bits in it.
That's a good description. Well, with that, I think we are going to split this into two separate videos. So stay tuned for True North, the best WoW zones ever.
All right, I'm looking forward to it.
All right, peace out.